Welcome to Be Customer Led, where we'll explore how leading experts in customer and employee experience are navigating organizations through their own journey to be customer led, and the actions and behaviors employees and businesses exhibit to get there. And now your host, Marbu Brown.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Be Customer Led. We always like to bring you guests who are thought leaders, folks who will give you insights that you can go and use right away in your own customer experience and employee experience journey. And today we have another treat for you. We have with us today Brett Frazer. Brett is an author. He is a customer experience expert. He has honed his skills at places like Microsoft, Adobe, Sunbasket, and he is the co-founder of Service Matters. We are looking forward to this discussion with Brett because I believe he's got a lot of nuggets that you are going to be excited that you can use right away. So welcome to the show, Brett.
Marbu, thank you very much for having me, and looking forward to a discussion and sharing some perspectives with your guests that, like you said, that hopefully they can pick up and implement.
We're really happy to have you. And, one of the things we like to do is to help the folks who are listening to this episode, watching this episode, understand the background of the folks who are coming to share with them. And so why don't you start off by sharing a little bit of your career journey and how you got to be where you are today. So we'd love to hear a little bit more about that. Why don't you start off there?
Absolutely, Marbu. Thank you very much. I think, first of all, my accent, I'm not natively from America here, as where most of your guests probably are listening from. I grew up in New Zealand, wonderful place to grow up, and had a great upbringing in that area. My last year of high school, I was a high school exchange student and ended up in America. And that kind of set a path and a pattern for where I'd head to in the future. And so coming out of that experience, kind of was in a multiple mindsets of what I wanted to do and where I wanted to get to. And like most people who ended up in the customer experience space, it wasn't where I expected or kind of thought I was going to be at that point in time. After a little bit of time in university, I didn't graduate, so that's why I say a little bit of time. I ended up back in America and had a totally different career path in mind. I was originally going to be a sports massage therapist. My goal was to get hooked up with some kind of professional sports team and work in that arena for a long period of time. And through a connection, I was playing rugby in Texas, which is where I was living when I moved back. And through a connection, I ended up taking a job as a customer service rep at Microsoft to pay my way through school, and just happened to be quite good at connecting with people and helping, and just got these progressive roles through the organization that ended up in management and customer service in the US. That and what I was doing there, and kind of what I really leaned into the different aspects behind what made the organization work, led me to leading the Microsoft COPC certification. And helped take Microsoft through its first couple of COPC certifications in the US. Had a great opportunity to take that knowledge and broaden it out into Asia Pacific and help to create the Asia Pacific customer service organization for Microsoft. Each other region had a regional group, but APAC and China was all kind of individual countries. And so that was kind of really interesting because it was my first startup experience inside a massive organization. So it was really scrappy. We were creating newness from how we were going to create it together, but having the big bank of a nice big company behind. So I had a great opportunity there and built that organization out. Spent 12 years at Microsoft. And at that point, I was really getting to this aspect of there's more to this customer service value that we can bring than the company was seeing. I started kind of getting this, we're just the tail end, the cost center, and it's somewhere to reduce cost and to eliminate waste. And the focus that was creating, I could see was leading to experiences that weren't really the type of experiences that we were wanting to deliver for our customers. And so that led me to think, okay, well, where else can I go, or what else can I do? And I looked at, well, what did I have? What did I have a background in? What did I really enjoy? And I wanted to get a better understanding across the broad company rather than just that customer service focus. And I really enjoyed the aspect of developing teams, developing leaders, helping to get into that career development perspective, helping teams go through change, etc. And so I took a diversion outside of customer service and support and to go down to the organizational development space. And that's what led me to Adobe. First within the customer service space at Adobe, still in APAC. And then it gave me an opportunity to springboard into organizational development. And so I spent about 4 years in that organization, really building this employee experience muscle to go with the customer experience and getting to work with all of these other organizations across the ecosystem of a large company. And so working with engineering, working with legal, working with finance, working with procurement, etc., truly get a good understanding of the rest of these businesses. And so then I took that value and that understanding and came back into the customer service space, initially in the outsourced provider. And so I spent a little bit of time in the BPO space, and then coming to be able to bring all that back together into Sunbasket, which was the area you looked at. And that was my next startup. And so truly a startup company, and really being able to take all of this knowledge that I built from the customer service space with Microsoft and Adobe and making a network beyond that, and with this employee experience, an organizational development space, and bringing that to bear in a combination. And so that's what led me into Sunbasket and 7 years there. And that was really the impetus for creating the book. Since then, I've done some consulting and some other areas around it, but that, yeah, really the kind of the background to bring me to where I am today.
Well, it's kind of interesting because I think initially, as people started to understand the importance of customer experience, you started seeing folks creating head of customer experience and chief experience officer types of roles. But I think initially people didn't recognize how intertwined customer experience and employee experience are. Right. And I think that realization is blossoming more and more, and people are understanding that there's no way you're going to have great customer experience if you don't also have great employee experience. Those two things are totally interconnected. So we're going to get into the book, but before we jump in there, was there like a big aha moment for you seeing the interconnection of these two things, the customer experience and the employee experience? But was there like an aha moment for you when that kind of, first came together?
I'm not sure if there was a single aha moment. I always kind of had in the back of my mind this aspect of the connection between the two. And I strongly, have seen that and then been able to, over time, see that correlation connect more and more. And I think it goes beyond just the employee experience within the customer service space, because I think I'm very, very strongly believing there's data out there now that backs up that your customer experience is predicated by your employee experience of those who are touching your customers. I think that time at Adobe in that space really expanded that. But what I think took it to the next level was really, while we were at Sunbasket, really looking kind of behind and going out and looking at how do employees who are not in that customer-facing role think about their impact on the customer experience. And I've seen this over and over again where a lot of organizations start going down this role of trying to make the connection that truly everybody's job in the company is customer experience. No matter where you sit in the company, whatever you produce, the output of that work has some kind of input and impact into the experience of the customer. And, when you look at a B2C that's in multiple different areas, from whether you're setting up on the billing and how does that work, whether you're setting up on the procurement and how do people receive their products, et cetera. Same thing within a B2B organization, right? It's everything that you do has an impact on that. And I think really one of the aha moments was, how do you expand that and truly get that knowledge outside of those people who have that direct impact on the customer? And so one of the things that we did at Sunbasket to do that was to embed a question in the employee experience survey so that every employee was asked the question around their belief of what's their role, or how do they attach to the experience of the customer. And the first time we ran it, there was a few people outside of the customer touch point roles that felt that they had it connected to the customer experience. But a lot of the comments were, that's what customer service is there for. And so it's really then using that as a way to create knowledge, to create insight, to work with my peers across the rest of the organizations to help to identify how each individual role, each individual department, what their impact was on the end customer experience, and really be able to tie feedback from our surveys into that space. And there was something we really did that I think helped to solidify that at first at the leadership level, because I think if your leaders and your peers don't understand that connection or see it that way, then it's really hard for them to flow that on to their employees.
The rest of the organization is not going to get it if the leaders don't get it. So I imagine in your second or third year after you guys had worked on this a little bit, you had more widespread recognition among people across the organization that they had an impact on the customer experience too. It wasn't a department, it wasn't somebody else's job, it was their job also, right?
Absolutely.
So let's talk about
one thing on that. The one key thing that I really learned on this that I think is a big piece for anyone out there who's in the customer service space, who's struggling to get their peers to really connect into this. I used to present customer service data. And what I realized is there's no such thing as customer service data. Customers don't call for support or for help because of customer service. They call because something's happened somewhere else in the business chain. And when I stopped presenting it, we're basically stewards of business data. And so that's what I changed. I changed presenting from customer service data to here's your business unit's data. And having that approach and really getting that connection got the leader's mindset on board. And then you could get them to realize their impact and what was happening from the feedback from customers, what the calls were and the contacts from customers that were related to activities that happened in their business, and how that we could determine where the opportunities to reduce that came from. And that was the unlock to them also then being able and willing to stand with me as we talked about everybody's impact on the customer experience.
Absolutely, because when somebody contacts customer service, like you said, something across the value chain has gone wrong that has that customer on the phone or in a chat or in whatever method of, connecting with customer service that they use. Something somewhere has gone wrong in the value chain. And it's about that business unit or that set of units, if you will, that are part of that value chain that actually is not customer service data, as you said. So, you have a really interesting title for your book. You call it Your Hidden Profit Center, Mastering the 5 A's of Successful Customer Engagement. Tell us, what was the white space that you saw that motivated you to get out there and write that book?
So there's two things. I think, like you mentioned earlier, I knew early on, customer service being a cost center, right, was always kind of looked at how do you strip out cost? How do you strip out time and energy and effort and those types of things. And I was even part of this in the early days at Microsoft. I remember being part of time and motion studies where we would look at what was going on and we'd look at all the parts of the interaction. And, someone would come back and say, oh, hey, this is wasted time because logically the next thing that an agent needs at this point in time is to do this. And so let's not engage in the customer around this conversation. Let's jump straight to that logic next best activity. And so that kind of, I think, really got the initial piece of there's something missing in the way that many organizations approach customer service. And so I'll break the title into two portions. I'll look at the mastering the 5 A's of successful customer engagement. I think most companies focus very heavily on one A, sometimes on a second A, and a little bit on a third, right? So I think most organizations feel, and from a leadership perspective, say customer service is there to assist our customers as quickly and cheaply as possible and get off the phone to the next person, except sometimes when we want to ask them for something, the upsell or cross-sell. And maybe we'll do a little bit of alignment just to make sure we're doing some troubleshooting to make sure that we know what the situation is that they're calling us about. And so that's really where I see a lot of organizations focus their energy and the time.
Okay, so I'm going to pause you for a second because I just want to make sure I got those. So that was assist, ask, align. Those are 3 A's.
Yep.
Oh,
3 A's.
did I get those?
Right. Mostly on the two, the assist, a little bit on the ask and the align, right? So I'm here to assist you as quickly as possible and get on to the next. What that does, and that whole time and motion and looking to say, well, what logically do we need, leads to the type of story, and I'm sure you've had this experience yourself. Most of you listening have probably had this. You call into somewhere, you get someone like me who answers the phone and says, hi, Mabu, how can I help you? and you tell me the situation, you tell me the problem, you tell me what you've tried to do to solve it, you told me the frustration it's caused, sometimes you even tell me how you want me to solve it. And then you're met with okay, Mabu, can I have your email address, please? Or can I have your ticket number? Or can I have your case number? Or something along those lines. So the element of the agent and looking at the next logical thing is that they need, after you explain, after you've heard it, logically, the case number or the email address is what they need to pull the information up. But when customers call us, they're generally not in a logic mindset. They're an emotional mindset, especially if it's a very frustrating problem.
That's right.
So we need to address their emotional mindset and their emotional need before they get into a space to deal with the logic need. So when you get met with that, Mabu, can I have your email address, please? There's generally two things that happen. Either mentally, you say, oh, this is going to be just as difficult as I thought it was going to be, and you begrudgingly give me your email address, and you distance yourself further from me. Or you say, hey, wait a minute, Brett, you didn't understand me. You didn't hear me, and you repeat your issue over again. Now, the reason why we have experts say or agents ask for their email is to reduce the call time. But both of those two things actually end up generally increasing total call time, either on that call because they repeat themselves, or from a subsequent call if they don't think they were really understood. And so even though you give them an answer that may be the right answer, they don't believe that they were understood or heard. And so quite often they'll shop around and call back again to see if they get a different answer. And so the missing step before that is addressing that emotional mindset or that emotional need. And that's really where acknowledgement comes into play, right? And it's a simple element of being able to acknowledge the customer as a person, right? Mabu, I totally hear you. Acknowledge their relationship to the company. As a new customer, I can understand, or as an existing customer, as a VIP customer, something that, again, acknowledges their relationship to the company, can understand why this is frustrating. That's obviously not the situation we'd like you to achieve, to receive, etc. So you're creating an acknowledgement of them in the situation they're at the moment. It doesn't take very long. And when we proved this out at Sunbasket, we were actually able to tell by putting this in play, we reduced our average handle time and our average contacts to resolution by making these steps and putting this into play. So the first step is to acknowledge the customer. And then if they tell you what they want, acknowledging, that you say, hey, I understand that you'd like to potentially get a refund out of this situation. So that's the first step of the 5 A's is acknowledgement. The second step is alignment. And now some companies do this with troubleshooting. They were trying to align on the specific situation that led to the problem. Where I suggest that companies don't do a good job of sometimes is actually aligning on what's the outcome that the customer's looking for. And so I'll give an example. If you call and you say, I want a refund. Well, a refund isn't an outcome. A refund is a pathway to an outcome, and that outcome is I want purchasing power of my money back as quickly as possible. And if I can anchor you on that as the outcome that you're looking for, then I can potentially find other ways and even better ways for you to get to that. So for instance, if I'm working with a subscription company and it's a weekly subscription and you're talking to me the day or 2 days before your billing cycle and you're looking for a refund, well, a credit against your next order is a quicker way for you to get the purchasing power of your money back than a refund, which could take 3 to 5 business days. And so kind of looking at that aspect of really trying to say, well, what is it the outcome that you're looking for opens up more possibilities for what the actual assist options are, and especially if it allows you to give then options. And so then you can align on different options rather than a single element.
It's interesting because I think at Amazon, they have something called the customer service tenets. And one of those tenets is treat every customer as a friend, right? Now, the interesting thing is that when a friend talks to you about a problem, what you do with your friend is you try to help them problem solve. And you guys try to problem solve together. And as you problem solve together, you try to come to an outcome that helps your friend solve that problem. And when you're talking about this, acknowledgement and alignment, right? I see those types of elements in there that, we're in this together. It's not, I'm separate from you. It's not me against you. It's us in this together. How do we work on this together? and how do we problem solve together to get to the answer that's a favorable outcome for you, and that when you leave this experience gives you the sense that you were cared for, right, as part of this experience. So this really resonates with me as I hear you describing this. But let me let you continue.
Absolutely. And you're right on that right path, because when you do those first two things correctly, you are changing the dynamic. You are going from a me against you to a you and me against the problem, right? And so that's the alignment that you get from doing those two steps to get you towards that element of improving the outcome and improving their likelihood of being satisfied with the outcome. So we did those two steps before moving to the, okay, now here's the actual assist. And once you've done those two things, I've acknowledged you, I've aligned on what the outcome could be. Now I can say, great, Mabu, in order for me to be able to help you with that, can I have your email address, please? Now you're willing to give me that email address. Now there's a reason to want to give me that email address. You feel heard, you feel connected, and there's a, let's do this.
Now, let me ask you something about this, because on the one hand, I'm thinking about this whole idea of authentication. So I'm thinking about that email address or something like that being part of the authentication aspect of this. So if you've gone through acknowledgement and alignment before you get to assist, how have you dealt with authentication?
So that comes in between. So between the align and the assist, where the authentication comes into play. Because normally when you're talking through alignment, you're not talking through anything that's PII or anything that would go through from that perspective. And you're relying on the customer to give you the information that you can validate that you're generally going to be talking to the person who you should be talking to. And so that's when you do the, okay, great. In order to move forward, now can I get that email address? Now can I get that order number? Now can I get that whatever, if the customer hasn't offered it up? Because sometimes they'll offer it up early on. But that's where that authentication comes into play if you haven't already had your system authenticate. Right, if somebody's logging in from an account and they're coming from an app and they go through the authentication, right, that's some of that element. And again, even if you do have that system authentication, then you're looking for the, okay, am I really doing something that is going to make material impact and I need that place? But that's where that step of that authentication becomes after you've aligned, before you go into the actual assist. You still need that, absolutely, to know you're doing the right thing on the right account and with the right person with the right permissions.
Okay, here's about that. And in a lot of scenarios, people do authenticate before they actually get to an agent. And so sometimes the agent can even start off by saying, thank you for authenticating and everything like that. So, but I know that, the authentication often is an important part of this interaction. So tell me, why do you call this the Hidden Profit Center? I know you've been going through some of the A's and maybe I should let you finish that, but I'm wondering, why do you call this the Hidden Profit Center?
Yeah, that'll get with the next two A's. So the next two A's is what leads to the Hidden Profit Center. But just before I get there, I'll really quickly, we changed that and just introduced the align and the assist without changing any of the options that we were providing to customers or had offers for the assist, or the acknowledge and align rather. We saw a 4% increase in issue resolution.
Okay.
We didn't change anything whatsoever as far as what we were providing, but it was just those two activities. And we saw a 13% reduction in secondary calls on the same topic.
Okay.
And so that automatically gives you an element of, hey, there's power in doing this and there's cost savings from doing this. We saw our long calls drop significantly from escalations and from re-explanations when we were doing the initially just going in and asking for the email up front. And so we saw significant cost savings and improved in customer experience from just putting those first couple of places in place. Now, where the profit center comes into play, a lot of organizations have an upsell or a cross-sell question they will ask to a company. And most people do that once they've given the assist. I've fixed your problem. Now I'm going to ask you for something. The problem with that, and where I see many of those programs don't achieve the success that they could, come in from two areas. One is, A, you're asking customer service people to be salespeople, and they don't feel like being a salesperson just to kind of push something out there.
It's interesting because there are some companies that actually consider those customer service associate roles to be sales roles.
Yeah.
I mean, they actually classify them that way.
And then there's what's the profile that you're hiring for? Because a profile of a good salesperson is quite often different than a profile of a good customer service person. You can find those unicorns who are great at both, or you can hire for the customer service skills and set up the framework that makes them feel less like a salesperson when you get to that step. And so what I see as the problem on the customer side is if I've just fixed a problem for you, then in my mind, the company created in the first place, you've built no reciprocity. There's no value that's been built back that I can then tap into. And so you're asking me for something after, and essentially I've just had to invest my time to fix a problem that you caused for me. And so the missing step between that assist and that ask is, how do you give value to a customer? You give some kind of advice. You give some kind of insight that's of value to that customer. And so that's the kind of the missing bridge between the assist and the ask phase. And so that advice can be something that's purely beneficial for the customer. You could look and say, hey, I see that, through our telemetry, see that you're only using these 3 functions of your software and you have these other 2 functions available to you. Are you aware of those? Or is there something I could help you to understand that might help you be able to use that more? Or, and I'm blanking on here.
Well, here's an interesting point, because I think you've made a point here that's a very important point, but maybe it's just a little bit subtle. Because essentially what you're saying is, I've contacted the contact center because I needed that contact center to fix something for me. Something that never should have gone wrong in the first place, right? So when you fix that for me, you haven't really done anything special for me yet. And what you're saying is that the traditional way of approaching this is having the mindset that I fixed this, so basically I've done something for you. Now I get to ask you for something. But what you're saying is, no, you haven't really done anything for me yet, because I'm here to deal with a problem that shouldn't have happened to me in the first place. So you fixing that's great, but you haven't really given me anything.
Yeah, I think you brought me back up to 0.
Yeah. So, like you came from -5 to 0. And so what you're saying is, now give something, then ask. And,
absolutely.
And that's the subtle difference there. But I think it's a really important point, for people to latch on to that. Yeah, you haven't given anything yet. You haven't necessarily earned the right to ask yet.
Absolutely. And that's really where it comes into, as to how do you give something that's of value to them that earns the right. It could be purely for them, like I said, or it could be something that's a mutual benefit in that advice. And one of the things that we did and used very often at Sunbasket was we would look and identify, if a customer has this particular problem, historically, how often would they then have another follow-on problem within a period of time? And so we would then use that and be able to say, hey, just to let you know, Mabu, about 50% of the customers who ran into the problem you had also run into this problem within X period of time. I want to make sure you don't have that problem later. Do you have another minute that I can just make sure that doesn't happen for you? Right? That's great for you. You're all of a sudden, hey, Brett's looking out for me, right? He's making sure that I don't have this future problem. And for me, for the company, I'm making sure I don't have to pay to serve you in that future problem. So there's, again, a cost benefit of being able to spend another minute or 2 on that call to prevent another 10-minute call later on.
Yeah, I'm going to go to a different industry for a minute here and think of financial services and how many people call, to get something done on the phone that they could actually do in the app, right?
Absolutely.
And that agent could spend a little bit of time basically giving that customer a little bit of coaching on how they could, for example, do this in the app and not necessarily have to make a call next time to be able to accomplish the same thing. Now you've given them something, maybe you can ask for something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's exactly one of the things that we would do as well. And when we use that exact element when we first introduced our self-service, sharing out when they contacted us and we'd help them something they could have done through self-service. And that helped to get a significant increase in our self-service and decrease in call volume for those activities. So absolutely, that advice has a a dual purpose in both getting the right to ask, but also in the ability to save future costs for the company.
Well, Brett, let me tell you, the way you frame these A's, I certainly think of them as something that, folks could take and use right away in their own business. And I'm sure we're just scratching the surface because you wrote a whole book on it, right?
Yeah.
And let me mention that book's name again, Your Hidden Profit Center, Mastering the 5 A's of Successful Customer Engagement, right? And so you wrote a whole book on it. And, so folks can get the book and delve into that in much more detail. But why don't you take a minute here and, recap the 5 A's for us so that, people have them top of mind and can remember some of the things you've been sharing with us.
Absolutely. So I'm going to recap the first 4, and then I'm going to spend a little bit on 5 because that's where the profit center comes in.
All right.
So the first 4 you can do on any and every single call, right? And I think you should, right? You would acknowledge the customer, who they are, their relationship to the company, acknowledge the problem and that it's a problem for them. The worst thing you hear, and I know where it happens, but my pet peeve is, hearing an expert or an agent respond back, "Oh, not a problem." Well, if it wasn't a problem, I wouldn't be calling you in the first place, right? It's supposed to induce confidence, but it does the opposite. It diminishes the customer's perspective. So you acknowledge that, and if they say how they want it fixed, you do that. Then you align both on the situation and the outcome they're looking for. When you can give multiple choices out of that outcome in the assist, you give them those multiple choices, because if they get to select their assist, they're much happier with it than if they just give them one option that you give them to. Then you advise, you give them something that's of value to them that could also be of value to you as a company. You can do those on all 4. Now, if you get to that 4th one and the customer's still not in a great mood, you're not going to ask them for something unless the ask is, "Hey, Mabu, I can sense that you're not quite still 100% happy, knowing that those are the options we have. What else could we potentially have done so I could think about what we can improve the business with, or let my leadership know what we could do in the future?" That's one ask that you can do in an unhappy customer situation, but you really want to gauge that and either give your experts and the agents the empowerment to know when and when not to ask. You don't want to force them to ask every single time, because that breaks them and it breaks the trust with the company, the customer. But in those situations,
that's like ignoring context, right?
Yeah.
And you
absolutely.
never want to do that.
And so when they're happy, or when they're neutral at least, that's when you can go into the ask. And why I say it's the hidden profit center is the upsell and the cross-sell is just one of the ways that the customer service and that interaction can help to derive long-term revenue for the company. And that's really what it's about. It's driving long-term value for the company out of that customer. And so there's 4 different asks that we identified and we put in place, and that are in the framework and explained in detail in the book. The first one is the ask for revenue, the upsell, the cross-sell, the save, or the renewal, right, depending on where you're at. The second one is an ask for an action, right? If you can identify, if you've got a data analyst team that can help you with this, we talk about in the book, but there's a approach called fog modeling that can identify what are the actions of high-value customers. So if you can identify those actions and know if your customer hasn't taken one of those actions and prompt them to take that action, then you're prompting their increased likelihood of becoming a sticky long-term customer. Like, for instance, downloading the app. Exactly. Same mindset, right? That's something there. Or if you've got an add-on type of a thing. Did you know that we also sell this, right? Is it something, for the next session, would you like, doing that? Downloading a white paper. All these types of things that if this action is taken, they're more likely to sell, they're more likely to stay with you, etc. Buy or stay with you. So that's the second one, is an action, right? The third is an ask for information. Product teams, marketing teams, sales teams, R&D teams, they're quite often going out and spending money getting insight from focus groups and those types of things around information that's important to them. You're already spending money with this customer in front of you right now. Right? If you can, again, find a question. And what I did every month, I'd go out to my business leaders and I'd say, what do you want to know from your customers this month? What's important for you to understand? And we would build that into our CRM system. And then on a rotating basis, it would pop up for the expert that they could ask this question. We'd capture the answer. And then every week, I would come back with, hey, here's what we've heard. Here's what we've heard. Here's what you've heard. And it's feeding this information into them that's of value to them to create better connections, to create better experiences, create better products, and doing so in a way that they don't have to go out and spend as much money doing that. That's creating value for the company.
Absolutely.
The last one, the fourth one we created was an ask to create awareness. And so we had a really great example of doing this. It could be something like an upcoming event. It could be a product that they're not aware of, that they haven't bought at the moment. But one of the things that we did quite often that was really successful was to help our marketing team when they had important emails that they were sending that they wanted to get a high attachment and open rate to. We would do something simple as this. Mabu, I understand you don't open all of our emails. I don't open all our emails. Next month's email, highly encourage you to open it. Can't tell you what's in it, but there's a really important message we've got coming out. And I really, really recommend that you look at what's going on there. We fourfold increased the open rate of customers that we engaged with versus customers that we weren't engaged with.
Let me make sure I heard that right. Did you say you increased it by fourfold?
Fourfold.
Okay. That's a big deal.
That's a big deal.
That's
Absolutely.
a big deal, yeah.
And so that's where the Hidden Profit Center comes into play. Yes, you can create direct revenue from upsells and cross-sells. And if you do those first four things right, even if you've got a cross-sell or upsell today, I would bet the bottom dollar that you are going to get a better outcome for your cross-sell and upsell than you're getting today. Even if you don't have the ability to do a cross-sell or upsell, by utilizing the ask for action, the ask for information, or the ask for create awareness, you are going to have a positive impact on the long-term revenue of the company. And that's hitting your profit center.
Well, it's really interesting, some of those things you just mentioned, because, one of the things I often tell people is if you just think in terms of commercials, okay, look, people pay good money to get a 30-second ad in prime time or in any kind of time on television, or whether it's in, social media, or wherever they place those ads. People pay good money for that. But whenever you have your employee in front of a customer, that is a commercial, if
Absolutely.
you will, right? And if you think about the money that's spent on that, and typically your employee and your customer are spending more than 30 seconds together, right? And because they're spending more than 30 seconds together, you have opportunity to create value in that customer interaction during that period of time that they're together. And you've given some great examples of how a company can do that. You can essentially have a virtual focus group of some kind, spread across a lot of different people, but you don't necessarily have to go out and spend the money to do the focus group, because you have those interactions that give you that information, right? And people don't tap into that nearly enough. They don't understand that nearly enough. Or, like you say, increase that open rate fourfold. People would spend a lot of money a lot of different ways to try to do that. But here's an example of how you could do it. So, those are really great nuggets that folks can use right away. Hey, Brett, let me ask you this question. When you think of using these 5 A's, do you have like favorite anecdote or something like that comes to mind where, the 5 A's were put to work in a certain type of a scenario or something like that, and bang, here's the outcome that we got from that?
Yeah, I think I've given a couple in here. I've got many in the book as well. I'll do two things really quickly. I'll just go back. Organizations should look at their customer service as an impression, just in the same way they do with marketing, and measure it, because it's exactly what it is. That's exactly where you were going. And if you think about it and you measure the outcomes in the same way that you would look at an investment in your impressions from a marketing, that's what you should be looking at and doing. So I think when you look at it together, there was an element that kind of came out of this that we really looked at of how can we, by that aspect of aligning of what does the customer's true outcome come into play. One of the things when I was at Sunbasket, we shipped meals out to customers. That's what Sunbasket was, a meal kit delivery company. And one of the things, sometimes deliveries didn't happen. Sometimes things wouldn't show up in the way that they were intended to. But we rotated our meals every week. And so what was there and what was sent out to you, the customer would call up and say, I need you to reship this meal to me, right? That was the pathway that they were looking for. The outcome they were actually looking for is, I need dinner on the table. And I need you to help me solve that problem, because I'm responsible for it and I'm letting my family or myself down. And I've trusted you and you've let me down. And so when we really dug into that and tried to say, well, the outcome they're looking for is dinner on the table. We can't ship them a new meal. Giving them a credit or a refund really doesn't necessarily do that with low effort. And so it enabled us to really think about, what is a way that we can get to that outcome? And we identified that, we could go out and use a DoorDash or an Uber Eats or a delivery service to have that meal. And so we could turn around then and say, hey, Mabu, we can't send this out because of this, but it really sounds like what you're looking for is you need dinner on the table tonight. If I could give you a gift certificate for DoorDash, let's say, so you can get dinner on the table tonight, would that solve the problem for you? Even though it cost us slightly a little bit more, we were able to measure the reduction in churn because of late delivery or fulfillment order misissues. We were able to see an actual increase in orders in the next 3 weeks for those customers that took that option, for those customers that took a credit or a refund.
I'm curious about something. Did you have any of those customers ever post about that on social media?
I think we did. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I'm pretty sure I've seen a couple of those where, hey, fantastic, they helped me save dinner tonight by, they couldn't deliver what I wanted, but they helped save dinner tonight by getting a solution for me.
I imagine they would, because when it gets right down to it, in some respects, that would almost be unexpected. But that is absolutely, I think, the right way to address that type of an issue. Well, it's amazing. Our time has gone by very, very quickly. And while we've covered a lot of territory, I certainly appreciate you coming in and sharing this with us. So a couple of things for us to wrap up. What's the best way for people to get a hold of you or get a hold of the book so they can, dig into this deeper? Tell us, how do you want people to continue this conversation with you?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the book, Amazon is available through Kindle and soft copy on Amazon. So you can find it out there under the title name.
And let's repeat that name again.
That name again. It is
Your Hidden, there you go. I like that.
There you go.
Your Hidden Profit Center, Mastering the 5 A's of Successful Customer Engagement.
That's it. And then on LinkedIn, either through me or through Service Matters. Happy to connect in and answer any questions that you may have in regards to the book or anything else that we've discussed around that connection between customer experience and employee experience.
Yep. So now, as I go on to the next person who's going to join us for the program, what do you think I should ask them? What question would you like to see me ask our next guest?
So I think here's a question. What's the one change you've been wanting to create in your contact center that you have been hesitant to ask your leadership to invest in?
The one change that you've been hesitant to ask your leadership to invest in. Sounds very interesting. I'd love to know the answer to that question too. Well, Brett, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me on Be Customer Led today. I think without a doubt, we have covered the territory that we need to cover, i.e. we have given people things that they can use in their customer experience journey, their employee experience journey right away. I really appreciate you joining us, and thank you very much for being a part of the program.
Mabu, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for hosting, and good luck, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Be Customer Led with Marbu Brown. We are grateful to our audience for the gift of their time. Be sure to visit us at becustomerled.com for more episodes. Leave us feedback on how we're doing or tell us what you want to hear more about. Until next time, we're out.